Hey, welcome back to this project based on surrealism. As you can see in our project, we've got three birds with incredibly long legs, which is not how birds are built in real life. So this is a sort of fantasy surrealism artwork, and we're going to fill the background today with watercolor. Before we do that, though, I have to tell you that your three birds must, for this process to work, they must be colored very dark, very full. So before you personally get into the watercolor paint, I'm going to ask you to check that all parts of your bird, right down to the edge, right down to the line, is colored as dark and as full as it can be. I've got a few little spots over here on my bird that I want to touch up on the edges. So please look at any spots that are a little scratchy or appear with white spaces peeking through, because the watercolor paints, when we go over the crayon, if they're not dark and full enough, they will cover the crayon. But we want the crayon to be there and stand out. So remember to go back and check those things. I'm going to slide this aside for a second. I've got for myself a cup of water and a good watercolor brush. One of the ways that you can tell that it's a watercolor brush is that the bristles on a watercolor brush are always incredibly soft. They're not stiff at all. And I've got a cup of water here, and I've got my watercolor set. One of the first things that any great watercolor artist does is they get their set ready. And one of the things that requires is to take some water to each color. So with just water on my brush, I'm going to swipe on the edge of each of my colors to get a little bit of water in the set and to get it ready to work for me. So do you see that I'm pausing for a second to allow, I'm not covering the table with water. I'm not going to use brown and black today. I'm going to do 2 swipes on each color. That'll work out nice. And now my sets are ready to work. Again, I've dropped a little bit of water off on each set, and now my set is primed and it is ready to work for me. I'm going to now slide this over just a little so you can still see it on the video, but bring the artwork back. So what I want you to think about in this artwork is that our background is going to be completely abstract. It will be all about just color. We will not be trying to show trees or ground or mountains or anything like that. We're just simply going to fill the background with some watercolor experiments, is what I'm going to call them. So watch me here. I'm going to get a wet brush here. I'm going to do a small wiggle on the blue, and I'm going to bring some blue paint into my artwork, and I'm going to spread it just a little until it is no longer a big blob of color. I'm going to rinse, and maybe now I go to the red. Again, I'm not scooping, but just a little wiggle in the red will get me what I need. I'm going to place that red nearby and beside my blue. Again, I'm spreading ever so slightly onto the blue and moving the red around my paper until it's no longer a big blob of color. And what we're watching for there is what happens when the red and the blue get on top of each other. Maybe now I'll go for a little bit of yellow, and the same thing is going to happen here. Nearby, I'm going to move that around until it is no longer a big wet blob, and I'm going to pull a little of that onto the red and onto the blue. One of the things I want to caution you against is and I'm just going to move to a brand new spot on the artwork. What we're not doing in this artwork is a big mixed up swirl of colors. Please don't do that today. Instead, I want you to try to get each of these colors to live, these little experiment spots where you're moving the color, pulling them together a little bit, seeing what happens when the purple and the red live with each other next door. Bring some green down here. See what happens when I've got the green and the yellow together. Look at that. Again, this is really a lot of water. So what do I do when that happens to me is I move that away to new spots until it is no longer a thick blob of water. Are you seeing at this point that our black Sharpie or black crayon legs should be living, able to stand out here? Eventually, when you start to get these experiment spots really close to each other, you just kind of come in between them with some additional colors. I haven't used orange yet. So our background, again, is going to be abstract. In abstract art, now our project has the birds, which are surrealism, but our background will be abstract, meaning you won't see anything from real life in the background. It will be more just about color with these little experiment spots. Okay, I'm going to come up to the top of the paper now and show you what happens when you, I've got red on my brush here. We should be able to paint right around our birds and right over top of them if we did them heavy enough with the crayon. So did you see how the watercolor paint, when it got on top of the bird, it kind of just didn't stay, it didn't get dark. That's what we're looking for. Again, our paper today should not be super soaked at any point. If that happens, we're moving it out and try to get only a little bit of watercolor paint on your brush at a time. You can always go back for more, but try to start with a small amount on your brush, and never in the watercolor set are we scooping or digging at that, because in watercolor paints, the water becomes the paint. What is in the set is something called pigment, and the pigment transforms our water into the paint. Just going to do one little bit more, so you're starting to really see this come together now. I want to do a little more on top of my yellow bird. So right now I'm painting right on top of it, and as you can see, because I did my yellow crayon really dark and full, I am not covering the bird. The bird still remains. Again, remember that today what we are not doing at any point is a big swirly mess. Instead, we want to try these little experiments and see what happens when we pull a little of each color on top of each other, rinsing in between. Maybe do a little more yellow down here, pull that onto the green, pull it onto the blue. And I've got a few more. Put a little bit of violet or purple over this way. Again, if you end up on the paper and you notice that it's too much, move that water, move that paint to an empty spot. So today, I hope that you just enjoy moving the colors around this paper. Because it's abstract and we're not trying to paint anything from real life, it should be pretty enjoyable for you to just move the paint around the paper, pull them on top of each other a little bit. So I hope that you have fun today creating your abstract. I'm going to close up my set. This is going to stay flat on my table. If I lift it up and I tilt it, then some of that water goes everywhere. I'm going to rinse my brush in the cup. I'm ready for cleanup now, but I want to give you one last view of my 3 surrealism birds with color experiments in the background. The background being abstract, meaning there's nothing in the background we can recognize from real life. It's simply about color. So I hope you enjoy this project. Thanks for coming back to finish this. And remember that before you begin, You definitely want to double check. Did you color dark and full enough so that your birds will stay in the picture? Have fun today.